Welcome back to the channel, and today I am putting together the engine for the 2006 GTO that I got extremely cheap. So I bought this thing for $3,000, and these things go anywhere from 15 to 20. It has low miles, but the engine was all apart. They were trying to put a Texas Speed cam in it, and it just ended up in a situation where it never got finished, and I bought it as a project. There were a lot of parts that I had to procure because there was a lot of stuff missing. So they had the biggest cam that you can get from Texas Speed, and I needed valve springs, push rods, all the supporting mods for this. So we have now CNC heads because the old heads didn't have the valve springs, and I got these heads very cheap. So I picked up some CNC heads with 660 valve springs for $1,300 with rockers. It was a great deal. And then I got all of the rest of the gaskets, ARP head studs. I have an ATI damper coming from ATI, but it is going to take probably another few weeks. So let's get this engine together because I'm super excited to finally have this thing back together. I was able to get the oil pan as well as a rear main cover off, and now I have the oil pump off, and she is all stripped down, ready to start cleaning up. So if you guys remember when I first bought this car, it was like a month ago, I was talking about just slapping this thing back together and why I didn't want to do that because the engine was open and I didn't know what was in it. This is a very good example of that when you get a project from somebody else and you don't know how long the engine was open or if it was open at all and if debris got in. So this is the windage tray that sits at the bottom of the crankshaft, which you wouldn't think anything would get down there, but there is a lot of passages coming up from the center valley. And as you can see, we got some little pieces of like acorns in there from like a squirrel or something, and there's actually a lot of it. So this would effectively get into the oil pan, and it is so light, it most likely would clog the pickup on the screen. So as you can see, there's a lot of larger pieces right there. There's enough pieces to clog up the pickup. So this is a really good example of why you, even if you just go as far as pulling the oil pan and making sure there isn't anything in the bottom of it, or the windage tray in this case, because there wasn't really much in the oil pan. It was all caught in the windage tray. There was a little bit, but this is, this is a bunch of just squirrel stuff. Squirrels just, probably sat on top of the engine because there wasn't a valley cover in it, and they just, did their squirrel business. So as you remember, I saw a few little pieces here and there in the valley, which, it doesn't look like it's that concerning because there isn't that much, but if you look at all that stuff right there and all the stuff down here in the oil, it turns out to be a lot. So what I'm going to do now that I have the front and the rear timing covers off, I'm going to use a gun cleaner and clean the oil passages for the lifters. So these go right here on both sides all the way down, and I'm going to make sure that's all clean because that was also left open. And I am going to clean all of this, and then I'm going to clean inside of here. So I have this stuff. I usually use oven cleaner, but somebody recommended me using this. I'm going to put the link in the description. It's Ford engine degreaser foam. It's supposed to be the best stuff ever. So I have 4 cans of it here, which I think it was like like $7 a can or something like that. So we have it right here, and I'll put the link in the description for this. And it's called like engine shampoo. It's supposed to make whatever you spray it on perfectly clean. So I'm sure it won't get rid of calcium and stuff, but oil and, you know, residual stuff inside the engine, it should clean up, you know, all this in here. It's kind of funny using Ford product on LS, but you know, I build LSs, I build Fords, I build Hemis, etc. So let's get it all cleaned up. I also want to clean the cylinder walls before I turn the crank. I'll probably tip this upside down, spray it with brake cleaner just to make sure to get all that grit, because there is a few little things in here I don't like, but as long as I mitigate most of that, I just don't want to end up scoring the cylinder wall. The block is now 100% cleaned up, and I'm really happy that I went ahead and thoroughly cleaned this block, all the oil passages and galleys, and all of around the pistons and the cylinder bores and behind them and inside the engine, because there was a lot of debris, even some larger pieces of debris. So when I went with the pipe or the gun pipe cleaner through this one, there was a lot of debris in here, but there was a leaf in there. It was one of those helicopter leaves, plus there was a bunch of dirt and grime and some larger, you know, some of those acorn pieces from the squirrels. But now she's cleaned up, she's ready to go. So what we're gonna do is we're going to first I'm going to throw the cam in there so I can put all the timing stuff on the front with the oil pump, because I want to put the oil pan on. Then I can put the timing covers, then we can put the heads. Well, we could put the lifters in, we could put the heads on, and we could put that valley cover in, and we could just kind of go from there. But what I like to do when I freshen an engine up like this, it is really worth doing a new oil pump. You don't have to do a high volume and high pressure oil pump, but just a new oil pump. This car has 90,000 miles. It really helps. Then you don't have to worry about if the oil pump's going to go out, because you are making more horsepower. You know, this is going to be a pretty aggressive camshaft, because this is the max Texas speed cam that you can get. But yeah, oil pump, really good idea. I have new push rods, race lifters, and we have this adjustable timing kit. So this is really a good idea. I might have to adjust the timing for this camshaft. I'm not sure yet, but we have ARP head studs. I like the head studs over the bolts because it just makes things a lot simpler. And you know, studs, the torque is more consistent than bolts because you don't have to stretch them and all that stuff. So we have that, and then we have the big boy camshaft. This is like Texas Speed Stage 4 super lopey cam. It came with the car. I was like, well, I'll just get everything to support this, because the person that I got this from, they were just gonna, I think, use the factory valve springs, and this is like a 660 lift cam. So that wouldn't have been a good idea. And then I got these CNC heads for really cheap, and I got them because they came with the 660 valve springs, and they also came with upgraded, well, they're factory rockers with upgraded trunnions, which Texas Speed wanted like $600 for those, and the guy only wanted like $100 extra. So it just made these really worthwhile, and they're all CNC ported. They're, I believe, LS1, but they're a little bit larger CC than factory GTO, and I think it'll work out really good because I plan on turboing this. I'll have to replace the cam when I turbo it, but that's pretty much it, because I have the LSA head gaskets, we have ARP head studs. I don't think we'll have to do much then change the cam. So let's get all this back together, and then we can be one step closer to getting her back in the car. I now have the LSA head gaskets, the ARP head studs, and the CNC heads bolted down to the GTO 6-liter block. So I'm very happy this is done now because it's very stressful for me torquing bolts. I think it is for everybody because you've all seen the videos where somebody's torquing a bolt and it goes loose. But since these are head studs, sometimes when you're applying torque to them, you tighten them with an Allen and sometimes they do turn a little bit. So it is cringy, but I've never had an issue with stripping a thread, but this is aluminum block and aluminum blocks are very easy to strip the threads out of. I know a lot of people that have done it. So I torque these a certain way, and I've done it like this my whole life, ever since I started building engines, and I've never had an issue. As you guys saw in the time lapse, you probably were wondering, why do you go over the 30 foot-pound torque so many times, and then the 60 and then the 90? So this works with head studs and head bolts, but on the head bolts, after you torque it and you do the degree on it, you're not going to do the degree a bunch of times. So on the head studs, you go pretty much to the center, then you crisscross, but as you tighten the bolts or the nuts from the center out, the center is going to loosen up as you get further out because you're tightening it down. So when you come back to the center, you can apply 30 foot-pounds. So as you guys saw, I went over probably, I think, 4 or 5 times. And that was because as I tighten it out, it's flattening the head to the block. It's pretty crazy to think because it's a cast piece of aluminum, but you're applying a lot of torque to it. So it's flattening it out, and then it's going to loosen the center. So you want to have the correct torque applied, and the instructions don't tell you that. A lot of people, they build engines, they throw stuff together, they don't know this. So as you apply torque, you want to make sure that your torque for each step is 100%. Or that's how I always do it. I don't know if this is the correct way, but I've always done it, never had any issues. So then you have your first stage, then you go to the 60 foot-pound stage, do the same thing, do the 90, and then you do the same thing on the 90 because that's the final stage. But on these upper ones right here, these are 28 foot-pounds. I did the same thing right here. I just went out, back and forth. It wasn't very hard. These aren't really important. They're just there to kind of add support. These add most of the torque right there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get the valley cover back on the intake manifold. I'm going to wait to do the front, the rear cover, and the oil pan because I need to get a baffle. So I ordered a baffle from a company that has the 4-trap door system because this is a higher volume / higher pressure oil pump that I put on. And I didn't notice this on the GTO oil pan, that it has this little tiny thing and it's all closed off, and then oil just comes in from the top right there. So I think it's going to suck it dry. Plus I'm going to take it to the road course. I don't want to have any issues with oil starvation. So I ordered this, it'll be here in 4 days. Plus I still don't have the ATI damper. So let's get what we can back together, and then I'll worry about the oil pan, the front and the rear cover. Once that baffle system comes and the ATI damper comes, then we can stick it back in the car. The GTO LS is now 100% back together, minus the ATI damper and the oil pan baffle kit. So once those come, I'll be able to throw this back in the car. I was hoping they'd be here, but the oil pan baffle kit won't be here till the end of the week. And the ATI damper I ordered from Texas Speed is being drop shipped by ATI, and I haven't gotten a tracking notification. So hopefully that damper comes by the end of the week with the baffle, and we can get this thing in the car, because I want to do some burnouts, some donuts, some crazy stuff with the car, but I can't do that stuff without those parts. So I'm really happy this is back together and everything is torqued and ready to go. One thing with the valve train. So we have some crazy stuff going on. We have 740 length push rods, but the reason I'm saying this is because we have CNC heads in their deck. So with push rod engines like the LS and the Hemi and etc., you have to change the push rod length. So it's kind of weird that it worked out, but the 740s worked. We have decked heads, but we have the LSA 7-layer head gasket. So the head gasket's a little bit thicker, but then I also have the Johnson race lifters. They're a little bit shorter, and everything works. I don't have the tool to check push rod length, but I know how to check it. So I do it the old school way. And how you do that, if you don't know, I mean, let's put it this way. If you want to do it correctly, order the tool. But how I've always done it, and a lot of people that build LSs and push rod, like Hemis and stuff like that, engines, they just feel it. And how you do that is when the valve is all the way closed, if the push rod has a little bit of resistance, but you can still spin it with your 2 fingers, it is good to go. There's not enough load on there, and it's just like perfect. So I'm gonna just leave it at that. Get the tool if you don't want to do it the old school way. I do it the old school way because it's always worked, just like what I was telling you about torquing the head studs. But I'm gonna put all of the part numbers to do this build out in the description. So if you guys are interested in the parts I used, the head studs, the gaskets, etc., all that will be in the description. But unfortunately, since we don't have those parts, I can't throw this in the car. So I'm going to end the video here. I'm really happy that this LS is so close to going back in the GTO, the very cheap GTO. So we have $3,000 worth of parts. The car was $3,000. Hopefully she sounds great when she starts up. But if you like these videos, make sure to click the subscribe button, throw a thumbs up, throw a comment below. As always, see you guys next time.